So welcome everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tracy Nyer. I'm with the Virginia Small Business Development Center. For those of you who are not familiar with the Virginia SBDC, it's a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. We provide customized counseling and education for small businesses in Virginia. Most of our services are offered locally in our 27 locations throughout the state. But of course, right now, our services are being offered virtually, online, as in webinars like this one. Today's webinar is Protecting Your Remote Workforce Protects Your Business. And our presenter is Tom Stamulis. And Tom is a counselor with the Lord Fairfax SBDC, as well as a small business owner himself. And I'm going to apologize, Tom. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, given that I am having difficulty getting my computer to let me see my file. So again, I apologize, but without further ado, here is Tom.
All right. Well, listen, thank you very much, Tracy, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to everybody. I'd also like to thank everybody who's actually joined today. And as Tracy mentioned, we will be covering the topic of, how and why we need to protect our remote workforce, and how by doing that, you ultimately will be protecting your business as well. As we go through it, I believe, Tracy, if you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the chat section, and we have a couple people that will be collecting that information. We'll try to answer them at the end of the presentation, and then of course anyone that we don't answer, we will definitely either get it to you directly, or we will compile all of the questions and the answers and post it at several locations so that you'll be able to see those answers as well. So why don't we get started? So who am I? When you come to a presentation, you really want to understand who that person is. And just a little bio on myself. I have been doing cybersecurity in one form or another for well over 25 years. I started in the military, working in communications, and then when I moved into counterintelligence with the Army, we also, that's where I started my actual pursuit. When I really got into it, it allowed me to use my skills from a human intelligence perspective on a new platform. When I left active duty, I've been a consultant basically ever since I left active duty around 2000. And I've worked for large firms like PwC, worked for KPMG, and also you can see where I've held positions at Verizon, Cybertrust, which was a firm out of the Herndon area, as well as a company up in New York called Alvarez and Marcel. And in that manner, I've had the opportunity to do all manners of cybersecurity, from policy writing, pen testing, vulnerability assessments, advisory work. So in working in these large enterprises, it really allowed me to get a lot of experience, a lot of different industries. And then I actually moved out to the Winchester area in 2018 and made the decision that I wanted to start my own company. It's something I'd always wanted to do, but I really wanted to focus on small and medium businesses, because as we all are seeing, the threat is the same, but unfortunately small and medium businesses may not necessarily have the same resources or budget or access to people. And then, as I've been doing this for a long time, I did finally finish my degree with University of Maryland in cybersecurity. And then throughout the years, I've acquired different certifications that basically just kind of like help qualify an individual's understanding, because this is still a relatively new industry. So it's kind of sporadic on how you evaluate an individual and what their experience is. So to get started, the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic has really shot cybersecurity to the top of a lot of concerns. And because prior to this, people had a pretty good understanding of what was going on. They had a pretty good handle on how their businesses were interacting with the internet or other companies. But this lockdown, whatever you want to call it, lockdown, stay-at-home order, has affected not only the United States, but the world. And it's really forced business owners and companies of all industries, government, educational institutions to really have to turn on a dime. Normally, you have a chance to plan, do some testing, see how it works out. But unfortunately, because of the speed of the spread of this virus, businesses were required to immediately deploy a remote worker plan that they may not have even thought about a few weeks prior. So again, this is really presents just another challenge to all of the other challenges that we're dealing with as we try to take care of ourselves, take care of our family, and stay safe. So we'll kind of work through that. But ultimately, you can't stick your head in the sand. COVID-19 is not going to go away. So we really feel that you should address this. And hopefully today we'll give you some insight or some tips on how you can do that moving forward. So a couple of things that we're going to cover. We're going to talk about the changing workforce. What was the world like before COVID-19? What's it like now? Why you need a VPN? And then of course we're going to have some ideas to protect your company from the owner perspective, as well as what the employees can do to help the companies and the business owners protect that data and keep moving. And then what's the world going to look like after COVID-19? Because it is going to end. It may change, it may evolve into something else, but this pandemic will ultimately end, and we're going to have to figure out how we're going to recover from this. And then in the end, what are we doing, what am I doing, or what is our company doing, trying to help the businesses? And then at the end, I've got resources with links for all of you. Now, once we're done, we will upload this. It will go to the Lord Fairfax Community College. It'll go to my site where you'll be able to download it and see the links. So you don't have to feverishly write down anything. We will make sure you have access to that. And in addition to that, there may be some terms that we will cover if you're not familiar with them. We also have another handout that will give you some definitions on these terms, because if you looked over the last 5 weeks, there have been, I did a couple searches, there's been anywhere from 400,000 to over 1 million articles that have the term remote workforce, remote employee, cybersecurity. And as a result of that, it really, in a level of information overload, where do you go? Who's reliable? Who is just trying to get you to go to their site so that you can click on an ad? It's very hard to decipher. So I've really tried to just give you some general understanding and provide you just the tools that you can use to get through this. So the remote worker statistics, if you look at this, prior to the COVID-19 or the WHO actually listing it as a pandemic, about 27% of users worked remotely, either full-time or part-time throughout the week. And then once it was determined as a pandemic and the states and the country started instituting their stay-at-home restrictions, the level of remote workers went directly up as quickly as the stock market went down. And, you definitely see that it went from basically from 27% to, when the last stat that I had, which was the week of March 30th, about 64% of the entire workforce has now or is now working remotely. So you can imagine the challenges that this does. There are employers who may not have had laptops to hand out to their staff. They may have had to actually have their staff, and I have a client that actually did this. They had them pick up their desktops and take them home. Our infrastructure has been suffering. We've been finding gaps. People now understand what what Comcast deals are when you're on a shared line, kind of like the whole gym, or a health facility will sell lots of memberships, hoping and get, pretty much planning on the fact that none of us are all going to be there at the same time. So they can play with that model. If you look at the internet service providers, unless you have a dedicated line, they kind of did the same thing. They're like, no one's ever, there's no time everyone's going to be on at the same time. Well, we are. So you have some people who are doing business, you have some people who are watching Netflix, YouTube, and it's put a tremendous strain on the internet itself. And it's also identified areas where we have some significant gaps for individuals that need that reliable broadband. So as it expands, we're doing more. The Zoom meetings take up this, so it's definitely going to, it's impacting how we do business and when we do business. So before we can kind of talk about what we need to fix, I wanted to kind of spend a couple minutes on what it was like before COVID-19. So I put together some simple diagrams, and this will actually tie into the suggestions that I'm going to make as we move through this. So if you look at this would be considered a larger organization, and it's not to scale, of course, but you've got a main office, you've got 2 branch offices, and then you'll see on the left-hand side here, just a representation of a server and a VPN, firewall, and then of course down the bottom, you've got a representation of a remote worker. Over here in the middle is what they call the wide area network. In a lot of organizations, most of them larger in size, if they're geographically separate, they basically create like their own dedicated LAN or a local area network, but it's really a wide area network. And it works with routers and leased lines. So they're not sending their data to the internet, they're sending it across their own private internet. So that some of their data goes there, but ultimately when they so what that would allow for is these branch offices would connect through the wide area network, go up to the main office, and then out through the main office's firewall to the internet. So there's speed, there's efficiency, there's security, but ultimately it would go through this firewall. And a firewall is, look at it as a device or a set of rules, what can and cannot pass. And we talk about a router, and think of the router as the United States Post Office. So you send a message or you send a letter to, whatever, 123 Happy Lane. I've been using that a lot. And it's coming from bad hacker. Well, a router doesn't care who it's coming from. The router just knows that I need to get this to 123 Happy Lane, and they deliver it. Well, a firewall is more of an inspector. So the inspector knows that we need to prevent anything coming from bad hacker to anywhere it's going. So as it comes through, it sees that it needs to go to 123 Happy Lane, but it's coming from bad hacker. So therefore it just throws it away. So you look at that firewall as that rules that protects your internal network from sites and people that you don't want to have access. Now, with a remote worker, if you have that virtual private network, that is when it creates an encrypted tunnel between the remote worker and the company. Now, when you say encrypted or unencrypted, when you look at unencrypted, think of it plain text, something you can read with your eyes, any piece of paper. And if you think encrypted, think of that, that information now being changed. It's being encrypted so that it is unreadable or unrecognizable through different algorithms, and it will change all the letters and add numbers and characters and things like that. So it's basically unreadable. And the reason that's there is so that individuals on the internet cannot readily access or read the information that is being sent between your remote worker and the company. All right. So now if you want to look at what probably a lot of us are dealing with today, this is a simple network with no WAN, right? We have our remote offices. Each office has a firewall, and that firewall connects to the internet, and we use that as a protection to ensure that our data, our client information, our banking information, our intellectual property is all being protected from the internet. Same thing works for that remote user. They have a VPN. They connect through the firewall to the VPN server, and then all of that does. And that allows that remote worker to access all of the assets at the main office. So basically, it's like them sitting at the office, just not taking up the space. So it gives the business owners a flexibility to still have productivity out of an employee without necessarily having them to have to sit there. So that's great. That's how it was up until January, February. And then all of a sudden, like we talked about earlier, we get these requirements from the federal government and from each of our state governors that how we did business today is not how we're going to do it tomorrow. So you either have to shut down or you have to turn. You have to turn on dime. You have to figure it out. What are you going to do? Well, now you look at the next slide. Now you've gone from 3 offices or 3 branch offices that you had, whether you're IT staff or whether you have an IT company working with, you had a pretty good handle on what went in, what went out, what those end users could access. Well, the next day, now you have from 3, technically now you have 11 remote offices, because each individual who's working from home should be considered a branch office. They have all the capabilities that they had when they were in the office. Now they're doing it from a location, but the challenges is they're doing it from a location that you don't have control over. You don't own the connections anymore. They can go through any internet service provider that they have access to. So whether it be in the Winchester area where you're using Winchester Wireless, or you're using Shentel, or you're using Comcast, or even more so if you have individuals who, in those branch offices that were geographically in different locations. Now you have Verizon and you have AT&T, and they're all trying to access the internet, and they're all trying to get back to their offices so they can have access to the resources that they need, whether it be client data, applications, databases, all of that stuff that they can't readily get access to because they're not allowed to be in the office anymore. Well, this, as you can see, presents a significant logistical challenge for these owners and for the employees themselves, because it really changes how we did things. But because of that, it's really important that we work with our employees, because prior to that, the employee came in, they logged in, they did their job. All of the other things that were being done are being done in the background because you didn't want to burden the employee with that. You had an IT person for that, or you had an IT company that did all of that stuff on the back end for you. But now we have to really kind of get all of our employees on board, and now they're kind of like junior IT individuals, and a lot of them may not be comfortable in this manner and may not be as computer savvy as some of their colleagues, and then that's what presents another challenge to them. So we want to make sure that they have the right information. So what is a virtual private network? All right, you hear it all the time. You hear people say you should have a VPN. And this is a way that I want to explain why you need a VPN. So if you have a device, your personal device, you're at home, and you don't have a VPN, and you try to connect to the internet, everything you do is going to be considered unencrypted. That would be usernames, passwords, anything you send, emails, all of that stuff goes unencrypted from your computer to your home router to your internet service provider, whoever that is. And then they basically send it out to the internet on your behalf. and then they get the data back. As you can see the arrows, it's two-way arrows, comes back to you and there. Well, in between the internet and you, as we said, there are lots of what you would say roads that it travels to get where it needs to go. Well, that opens up the opportunity for hackers, your internet service provider, websites that want to track you, even competitors that they're trying to capture data. They can. This allows them to potentially capture that data that you're sending back and forth. So we think about what you sent, your client data, your accounting information, your bank information, from a business perspective, that's done without it. But once you add a VPN or a virtual private network, it changes. Now, some people might be saying, well, what about SSL or secure socket layer or TLS, which is the updated version of SSL? That creates a secure connection between your browser and the site only for that session and only for that site. So if you're like me and you have 13 to 50 tabs open at any time, not all of them are going to be encrypted because some of them might not use SSL, some of them might, and then you've got to think about it. And it's only for that one session. And as soon as you end that session, that encryption stops and then you're back. So it really makes it confusing, and that's where the VPN comes in. So with a VPN, you have what they call a client on each of your devices. And then that device, it's an application. It opens up the application, and then it sends a connection request to the server sitting at your office. Now, the beauty of that is that connection is encrypted from the moment they open up the application. So everything they send to the server is encrypted. Now, once it gets to the server authenticates, all right? So is Tom an employee of mine? Is he authenticated, or is he allowed to connect to the VPN? The answer is yes. We create that encrypted tunnel. So basically, if you think of a tunnel, all right, in your car, all right, if it was, people can't see into the tunnel. They actually have to be in the tunnel with you in order to know you're in the tunnel. So look at it that way. So everything I send out to the internet is encrypted, and it's variable or variated. What I mean by that is that the IP address that I'm sending it from, or the address that I'm sending it from, is changed when it gets to the VPN server that goes out to the internet. So basically, it takes your request, your data, it encrypts it, and then it sends it out to the internet, and it decrypts it at the internet. And the reason is because the internet is not encrypted. So it sends the request out, gets it back, re-encrypts it, and then sends it back to you. All done very quickly, all done in the background. But the best part about this is that those same individuals that we talked about earlier, the hackers and stuff, they cannot see that data. They have no idea where it's going or what it is when it's going from you or from the server or your company to the individual. So that's a real reason why you want to use a VPN. And there are multiple different types of VPNs. As I said in the resources, I've posted a link for several of the VPNs that are available. Now, keep in mind that if your company already has a firewall, you most likely have access to or are already using a VPN. So if you have a Sonic wall or any other commercially, small business or larger firewall, they will most likely, if not all of them, at least the most recent, the newest models, all have the capability of a VPN. And that gives you the ability to just run it right through your device. It does take licensing. Sometimes you get several licenses when you purchase it. What I would recommend is that you speak to your IT person or speak to the company that helps you with your IT and make sure that you have access to it if you're not already doing it. And it's very easy to add those licenses, but for whatever it costs to add those licenses, it's very little compared to the level of damage that could occur having all of these remote employees basically on the internet without these types of protection. I'm sorry, I'm just going to take a quick, okay, just want to make sure I know where I was for time. So, what can be done? And if you think about it, employees need guidance, and policies are, and I've been doing this for a very long time, policies are the bane of businesses. Everyone, they all know they need them. They hate doing them. And it's because it takes time, and it takes a level of effort that a lot of business owners don't have. They're already struggling to get to do what they need to do to keep their businesses open. But without a telework policy, your employees don't have guidance. And we use the term common sense. We really shouldn't. It should be uncommon sense, because just because you believe that that is something that should not be done on the internet does not mean that everybody agrees with you. So it's important that your employees have some type of guidance from you about what they can and cannot do with company devices, or what they can and cannot do on the internet. We'll touch a little bit more on that as we move forward. There's also a big term that you hear: you don't know what you don't know. So if you've never done any type of cybersecurity audit, I would highly recommend that you do that, because as I said, you've gone from that example of 3 branch offices now to 14 branch offices, because you count your 3 original and now your 11 remote workers. You don't know, are your systems up to date? Is your data protected correctly? Things change. Every time a new patch comes out, there's a potential that it turns off something that your IT department enabled. You got to make sure that your people only have the access and the rights that they need to do their job. And that's very important, because if they have too many rights, they can make a mistake. And it's not that you don't want to look at your employees as trying to be malicious. They just might click on something. They might install something that they would not have been able to install prior to being remote, but they can do that now. And if you think about how rapidly we had to adapt our environments, I'm willing to bet there may be some oversight that was done. And the other part is you can't always expect people to go back and look at it, because your IT department is probably struggling. They've got people who are calling them on a regular basis because they can't do something, or they can't access something, or the email isn't working. So your IT team is working overtime right now just to keep the network up. You can't really expect them to be able to go back and double check on things because it's chaos for IT. But you can use your own IT people. You can use the IT company that you may have a relationship with. They have the ability to do certain aspects of security, or testing or evaluation. And then, of course, you can work with a cybersecurity company that specializes in nothing but identifying vulnerabilities and helping you understand the best practices that then you can share with your own IT staff or your IT company. So they really work in tandem. And sometimes people think that security companies are out to replace your IT company. They're not. Majority of them really want to work with you to secure it. And then they would rather have your team who understands your network, understands your employees, deploy those fixes. For the smaller business owners, if you don't have a firewall, you need to get a firewall. That should be like the first thing you do after you hang up this call. A router is not sufficient. All right, and when it goes back to what we talked about, a router is only designed to take a packet from point A to point B. They have routers that will tell you that they have certain controls, but it does not. If you're running a business, you need to have a router, you need to have a firewall, and you really need to have a commercially built firewall. Going to Best Buy is not the solution. It's really working with an expert, IT or security for that matter, to get you that. Firewalls are not that expensive. For smaller companies, a few $100s. And you're going to spend a few $100s on a really good router. But that's the first line of defense that every single small business owner should have. Now, you don't necessarily need one at your home office, so to speak. I still recommend that you do, but you've got to look at your budget. But if you are running a company at an office with employees, like I said, I can't say it enough, how important it is that you get a firewall and you get it properly configured. Now that you also have a number of employees remotely, perhaps they're all on laptops. Well, remember, these laptops are mobile. These laptops are not chained to your desk, and they're not secured by your physical controls, so they're mobile, which means that they can be stolen. Also, people can break into your employee's house and steal those devices as well. So you need to encrypt those devices. Because that way, if the device is stolen, it's a $1,000 laptop, not $100,000 worth of important client information. Also, if you are regulated in some manner because you're in healthcare or finance or something like that, that's also another thing that will potentially impose fines on you. And we keep talking about it's going to be hard enough to recover from this. The last thing you really need is to be worried about data being stolen and then released and then having, doing a HIPAA violation. So the nice part about it is I believe 9 out of 10 times, I'm going to say 10 out of 10 times, it's free. After this, I'll also be posting a page that will instruct you how to encrypt your PCs and also your Macs. Very simple, and like I said, because it comes with the operating system, it's no additional expense to you. Some of you may be using what we call as remote desktop protocol, and that allows you to access your, from your laptop. It allows you to access your desktop in your office and use your desktop in the same manner as if you were sitting in front of it. You're not. The problem is remote desktop protocol is insecure. All right, that's about all I'm going to say on that one. So it works. They're constantly finding new insecurities. It's readily exploited by criminals. So 2 choices here. 1, buy a VPN, continue to use remote desktop protocol. All right, because it's a very functional tool, but it needs to be wrapped in that virtual private network. If not, you got to find something else, and you need to close that port. So if you think about a port's a window. All computers come with about over 65,000 windows, and that service runs on that, or passes through that specific window. So you need to close that if you don't have a VPN to protect it. It's just a very insecure protocol that, like I said, it's functional, but by itself, is something that needs to be protected. Training your remote workforce. Not only is this new to you, it's new to your employees. They went from working in an office every single day, and now they're working from home. They're dealing with, kids, pets, different hours, all day long, Zoom meetings. It's really impacted how they did, and what the security measures that you had in place aren't complete. Let's just say that they're not complete. It's important that you continue to work with your team to make sure that they have the most information available. Now, one of the things I've noticed is there's a lot of tech companies who've really stepped up to the plate on helping small businesses deal with this new environment. Kaspersky is another one. They make antivirus. They have a 30-minute cybersecurity training course or video that provides insight to your employees. It serves 2 purposes. One is it helps your employees, but it also, if you've noticed, more and more companies are requiring that their vendors or their partners demonstrate that they're doing some type of cybersecurity training. So this is a good opportunity to get them there. There's a lot of free services available. There's another one that I'll have in the notes section from a company called SANS. It's SANS. They have a toolkit basically that will provide you information on how to secure your remote workforce. And then there's another really security awareness company called KnowBe4, who's also put together a kit for you with posters and reminders. So it's really good to get your employees up to speed on the new challenges that they're facing. And then the last one I want to cover here is cyber insurance. It's something that's been like a novel idea, but it's definitely something that you should look into. And the reason is it's going to be hard enough for all of us to restart our businesses or bring them back up to the level they were before this pandemic. The last thing you want is for a data breach to ruin your best efforts. Most cyber insurance policies can come as a rider on your existing policy. I just recommend you speak to your insurance agent, and they can tell you about the certain options that are out there. But in the grand scheme of things, it really does provide you a little more comfort in case something does happen, and it also provides you some funding to recover from some type of cyber breach. And I don't believe in fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or what otherwise you'll hear FUD. I don't believe in that, but the statistics are very real that if a small or medium businesses is impacted by a cyber breach, 60% of the companies will go out of business in 6 months because they're not able to financially recover from this. So you think about ransomware and all that other stuff. Spending some money for this type of insurance will ultimately be a benefit for you as opposed to trying to deal with it without it. And if you have more questions about it after this, if you want to reach out to me, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about some of the things you may want to look for as you pursue that. All right, so it's not just the owner's responsibility to keep safe. Each individual employee, because if you think about it, if you are working remotely, you're lucky. There's a lot of people who aren't working. So the fact that your company is allowing you to work remotely and they want to be successful, then we have a responsibility as employees to do the best that we can to make sure that we're protecting. Basically, it's our network too. It's not the company's data. It's all of our data. We're stewards of that data. And if we don't do it correctly, we may not have a job to go back to. So the first thing you can do is secure your router. There are many people that have probably, first of all, may not even know where their router is. So you probably want to figure that out. And I'll tell you right now, the first thing you want to do after this, if you haven't done it in the last week, reboot your router. Unplug it, let it sit for 30 seconds, boot it back up. Routers are like computers. They get confused. And sometimes they don't operate efficiently. The other thing is if you have never done anything to your router, and you don't have anything specific settings, reset it. Okay, push the little button in the back and reset it. And the reason I'm telling you to do that is because most people haven't changed their default passwords. So every router's password and username is on the internet in lists, and they are standard. So if you don't change it and your settings are not set up correctly, people can access your router and use the default username and password and have access to your network, personal network, and ultimately to your work computer. So reset it. Change the default password if you haven't. I don't care what it is, but if you have kids, you definitely want to change the default password because you don't want them to go in and make any changes that you think might be in place. And then routers, like computers, have to be updated. So they have firmware. And that normally, if you go into your router, if it's not being done for you automatically by your internet service provider, then you need to go in, and there's always a section that'll say check firmware, check for update, just like we do with everything else, and it will install the new update. It fixes vulnerabilities, it fixes performance flaws, and it also may turn off certain things that are were enabled, that were identified as being insecure and now are not secure. Follow your teleworking policy. You really need to make sure that you're abiding by that because remember, this is it's a benefit for us. When you're on a company computer, only connect to the internet through a VPN because that means that the traffic that you are moving back and forth goes through your company goes through their firewall and gets to use all of the security measures that your company has already put in place. So it ultimately is protecting you from doing that. If not, then that way you connect directly to the internet, there are potentials of malware, viruses that could be loaded onto your computer, and then the next time you log in to your company, those viruses or malware could then be spread to your company's network. Only you should use the device, and only for work-related tasks. As I said, we're all home. Husbands, wives, kids. We may not all have all of the devices that we need because we have our kids doing schoolwork, and maybe our spouse is also working from home. That device that's provided to you by the company is for you. You don't want to let kids on it. You don't want to let your spouse on it. You don't want to let friends on it. You kind of have to use the same mentality that if you were in your office, most likely your kids are not going to use a company-owned computer in your office. You kind of want to use the same thing, or the same process when you're working from your own home. And then also, if you won't go to that site from the office, don't go to the site from your remote office. It's just good practice, and that, once again, using the VPN, that'll protect you from going to a lot of these sites that are offering up COVID-19 information and updates on the coronavirus, and these are just fake sites that as soon as you click on them, they're loading some type of malware onto your device so that it can then impact your company. So really, don't go to these sites that are potentially could not providing the right information. You really kind of want to pick one source and move from there. Now, if by chance you're on your own personally owned device, your boss said, look, I can let you work from home, but I don't have enough devices. You got to work from your own device. Same thing works for you. You need to secure your router. The directions or the ideas on the first slide will, they stand true here as well. If you're on an operating system that is Windows 7 or earlier and you're on a PC, you need to update or upgrade to Windows 10. It's like all of them are no longer supported, so they're not getting updates, and they're all more and more insecure the longer they're out of support. The best part about this, though, is even though Microsoft stopped offering free upgrades in 2016, you can still get free upgrades. So you can go to, there are several links. I have a link at the end of this as well, where you can go and get that upgrade from Windows 7 to Windows 10. And then from there you can move forward. So it is still free. So I would highly recommend that you take advantage of that if you're on a Windows 7 device. Keep in mind that you may have to check the hardware. If you're on a really old device, like 5 years old, it's doubtful that it's going to be able to upgrade. But if you're on something that's only a couple years old, I'm pretty confident that it will have the hardware requirements to upgrade to Windows 10. Regularly install operating system patches. So your boss has been doing it for you up to this point. You need to do it because your boss can't control your device. So they're going to rely on you to make sure that those Windows updates are being done on a regular basis. You can set them to be automatic, so you don't even have to think about it. And I would recommend that. If it's not something that you are comfortable doing on a regular basis, just go set it to regularly check and update, and then you don't have to worry about it. Encrypting your hard drive, I talked about that on your personal one. It's part of your operating system, your PC or your Mac, and it is free. It's definitely something I recommend you do. Definitely for a laptop. It's also a good idea for a desktop in case your house was ever robbed and they stole your desktop. You don't want them to have access to it. Antivirus. Again, something that the owners or the business owners were doing prior to this. They don't own your device. They can't technically make you do it, but it is in your best interest to make sure that you have up-to-date antivirus. It's not perfect. It's just a layer of defense that you want to make sure that you install. The nice thing is that, again, antivirus, there are several vendors who offer free antivirus. So that's another link that you'll have where you can go pick. There's 4 or 5 very reputable, qualified vendors that offer free antivirus. This also applies to business owners. If you have 4 or 5 devices, they can download that. Once again, the link's there. You can talk to your IT people, or you can talk to your company that you work with. So that's for the antivirus. So what's the world going to look like when we're all done with this? Some people think that we're just going to go back to the way things were. Some people think that it's going to be exactly the opposite of it. I will tell you, though, that remote working is here to stay, and for 2 reasons. One, your people are doing it now. The ones that weren't are. And if they're being productive, you're going to have a really hard time telling them they need to come back to the office all the time if they were actually productive while they were working remotely. But also, besides that, there are going to be social distancing guidelines that are going to be in place for several months, if not longer. Depending on the state you're in, depending on where you are, how dense the population is where you are, it could change county by county. We really don't know yet, but there are going to be demands. And then you got to look at the fact that you're going to have, because we still have individuals that have compromised immune systems. We have individuals who are older. Even though they may let us go back to the way things are, there may still be risks to them. And we as business owners have to, deal with all of those different scenarios. So it's going to change. And I think remote working is going to be here to stay. Is it going to be 65%? Probably not. But it's going to be a mixture of it. But it's not necessarily all doom and gloom. There are studies out there already that talk about the benefits, more benefits than drawbacks. And couple of the benefits is that employers can save. I'll share that report as well, that you can save up to $11,000 per employee for everyone who works remotely, even half-time. There's space, there's all the overhead. There's a lot of benefits that you might want to look at. Then also, there's the estimates that the average employee can save anywhere between $2,500 and $4,000 a year in expenses by working from home, eating out, all the other expenses that are associated with commuting. And then we're all trying to have that work-life balance and be able to maximize our time and be efficient. On average, the report also shows that these workers can save up to 11 workdays in commuting that they would spend on commuting. What does that mean? It means that your employees are probably going to be more productive. They're going to be happier. You're going to have less turnover because a lot of employees will even take a pay cut to go work for a company that allows them to have that work from home opportunity. But biggest thing is down at the bottom here, start planning today. We don't know when here in Virginia, when it's going to be. There's May 8th, there's June 10th, there's, sooner or later, but you don't want the governor to turn around and say, hey, you know what, you can go back to work tomorrow, and you as a business owner not have a plan, because your employees are going to look to you to have that, what's the next step? So the security officer offer, if you read in the Winchester Star yesterday, we were fortunate to have an article in there. And one of the things that we did, I was trying to figure out what I can do to help. I don't sew. I don't have any real medical background, so that's out. But one of the things that I did realize or that I thought about is that, all of our business owners are facing a new change. They've had to do a complete paradigm shift on how they do business. And they've, as a result of that, they've opened themselves up to a lot of risks. So one of the things that we always recommend is that you are always testing your external perimeter. And that's that firewall that I talked about earlier. A lot of times it's secure, it's locked down, but you think about it, every time there's a change, something can happen. Every time a salesperson needs a new connection with some other individual, which happens a lot, then that rule may not be correct. And then also, now that you have so many different remote workers, that you're probably dealing with a lot. So this is more of a health check. And so what I want to do is, if you reach out to me, basically all I need from you is your externally routable IP addresses, which are pretty easy to get from your IT people. If not, we can help you find that. And then what I'll do is I will scan your network using a commercial tool that I use for all of my relationships. It's a company called Qualys. QUALYS.com. You can go and look at them. They're one of the leaders of vulnerability management solutions. And basically, we'll scan your network every week and develop a report, let you know if any vulnerabilities have been identified. And really, like I said, it's just a health check that we'll do just so that you know that your remote offices are secure while everyone's working remotely. The other challenge is, when you owned the network, you owned access to everything that sat on that network. Well, we talked about the new world. You don't have access. It's very challenging for IT departments and IT companies to now monitor all of the devices that are now sitting on basically different networks that are owned by different individuals. And historically, the only way you could really do this from a vulnerability scanning perspective was that the individual or I would have to sit at your main office or one of your branch offices with access, and then connect to all of your remote workers that when they are connected to the VPN. Because if you think about it, I can't route to them through the internet. I have to go through that VPN and then scan those devices. But look at all of the drawbacks. Is everyone on at the same time? How much of an impact will my scanning have on your employees' ability to do their job? How much bandwidth does it take? So it's a challenge across the board. Who's on, who's off? So that really presents a problem. But what Qualys also offers is what we call these cloud agents, and it's a small application that your IT company or IT department can load on each of your desktops, laptops, servers, and virtual machines. And what it does is it gives 100% coverage of all of your infrastructure that it's loaded on, and it provides a continuous monitoring. So it doesn't have to be connected to the VPN. Once it's on, as long as it's connected to the internet, it will send an update to this secure portal to let you know what's going on, if it's missing any patches, if there's anything on there that needs to be addressed, any vulnerabilities that need to be taken care of. And the beauty of it, and if you talk to your IT department about it, there's no credential management, there's no firewall rules. It really only requires one encrypted outbound communication over one port. And then that will allow you to have that visibility on all of these remote devices that you didn't, or that you don't have today maybe, or that you didn't have, or that you had when you had your branches, because you own that network. So it was something that I thought I might be able to offer. It's going to be hard enough for our business owners to recover, to get started. We want to make sure that we can try to help while we're all trying to deal through this pandemic. So really, basically, if you sign up by May 30th, you can sign up now, but as long as you sign up prior to May 30th, this service will run up through August 1st. And I'm assuming that we'll have some sense of normalcy by August 1st. But that's just my way of trying to get you guys to, at least do what we can to help you stay secure until you can get back to your offices and get things moving there. So Andy Grove was one of the co-founders of Intel, and I really believe that we have an opportunity here. Companies that are, let's say, we won't say bad, but we'll say unprepared companies are going to be destroyed by this crisis. Good companies, or ones that are addressing things, are going to survive this. They may not flourish, but they're going to survive. But the companies that really look at what is in store and start planning for how we can recover from this, they're going to not only going to be improved by this, but they're going to become the new leaders. And that's really something that, you know, people may want to debate about, but it's really up to each individual company on how they're going to respond to what we're dealing with, and with the understanding that we may deal with this again. And what are we going to do on how to do that? So I think being, you know, the cybersecurity aspect of it, because we are now spreading ourselves even further out, and I think it's important that we do take care of that. All right, so
thank you, Tom. That was a great introduction to this for so many people. We're right at 2 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and close out the webinar. Tom, if you have a few minutes, we do have a few questions we can stay on afterwards and answer a few of those questions.
Sure.
So thank you all for participating today. Today's webinar was recorded and it'll be posted tomorrow on the virginiasbdc.org website. Be sure to join us at 1 p.m. tomorrow for our last session in this week's Road to Recovery series. Tomorrow's session is being presented by Jeff Nicely, also of the Lord Fairfax SBDC, and he'll be talking about 3 things you can do to connect with your customers during social distancing. If you missed any of the other sessions this week, you can also find them on our website. We recorded all of them. And please continue to check back on the Virginia SBDC website, as well as the Lord Fairfax SBDC website. We'll be continuing to add additional virtual trainings as we all learn to navigate doing business in this new environment. So Tom, I'm going to go ahead and ask a few of the questions here. Some of them are a little bit more specialized, and I think we'll save those for maybe an email response to those. When someone is working remotely and isn't connected to assets in the main office, do they still need a VPN when they're doing things like web searches or using commercial cloud apps, for instance, doing a Zoom call?
So, so yes, everyone is aware of the Zoom. Zoom became very popular, more popular than it ever was overnight. And as a result of that, it became a target. And it also identified a number of optional settings that should have been default. And they have, they've made a lot of changes. You can now identify where your data sits, you know, how you connect. So for Zoom, if you're not discussing something what you consider to be extremely sensitive or classified, I would say don't worry about the VPN. You can if you want, but once again, you start running into performance issues. So you kind of have to balance security and performance. That's something that every company does. So from a Zoom perspective, like I said, unless you're doing something extremely sensitive, I would not do a VPN. Now, if you're doing research and you're just doing research, yes, I would say if you have a VPN, connect to a VPN. And here's why. You're doing research, then you may open up your email, and then before you know it, you're, I don't know, checking your Schwab account, or you're uploading a check that you received, and you got your stimulus check, and you want to upload it to your bank, and all during the day. Well, now what happens is if you have a VPN, you don't have to worry about, is this secure? If you don't, then you have to ask yourself, do I need security for this, or do I need security for that? If you're watching Netflix, no. If you're doing day-to-day tasks and you're sharing passwords and usernames with either cloud applications or other websites, then I would recommend that you use a VPN. And if you're out, like when we go back to, if you're sitting at Starbucks or anywhere that has public Wi-Fi, always have a VPN on. We're not even going to get into that problem, but always have a VPN on if you are using public Wi-Fi in any manner.
VPN adds a significant lag. What's your advice for those of us who are in a rural area where there's no high-speed internet options? We're lucky when we get 3 MP down and 1 up.
So that is it's a significant problem, especially here in the Frederick County area. And I'm out in one of those rural areas as well, and I know exactly what you're dealing with. So there's a couple of options with that. If you have a decent phone signal, then you can use your phone because that's cellular technology. That technology is secure, and you don't need to use a VPN because that's not open Wi-Fi like you would be using. The other challenge, if you are on an open Wi-Fi, if you're using the, what do you call it? You're in a rural area, you don't have very good up. It's real. I would recommend that you have a conversation with your boss to determine what their perspective is. I don't know what to tell you. We're not going to be able to really fix the infrastructure as quickly as we need, but you're going to have to weigh the ability to do your job along with the sensitivity of the data that you're trying to use or to share with your office. Sorry, I wish I could give you a better answer, but it's kind of difficult.
I'm a consultant, one person, no IT office, many clients. I work with data. What VPN and firewall do you recommend, and who provides cybersecurity audits? I do have cyber and data security insurance in Norton, and thanks for the webinar.
So if you're a small office, home office, there are, first of all, and turn on your firewall on your operating system. Both Mac and PC have software-based firewalls. That's a start. If you are using a router that you own, then you just want to kind of look at, there are mixtures of router firewalls that are designed specifically for small office and home offices. There are, I did not put that up. I will actually add that to my notes, to my links for small office, home offices, and that you can get the combination. So you actually get the benefit of a firewall along with the wireless router that gives you the flexibility to work anywhere in your house. And I think that was both questions.
Yep. I think so.
Okay.
I recently updated, on a recent updated version of Norton 360, there's an option to turn on VPN for a computer used at home. I noticed that when it is turned on, I can't send email, and on webinars, the sound turns off and other types of interruptions. A couple of questions. Does using the VPN through Norton help with security or not? And if it does help, is there a way using it that doesn't interrupt the use of email and web?
So I get to be a consultant and say, it depends. So the first thing is I would recommend that you do a speed test on your internet. So there's it's speed test, I forgot, .org, I believe it is, but that's pretty much the generic one that everyone uses. And what it will do is it will test the connection between where you are and who your provider is. So you want to look at that. If you are paying for a certain amount, but you're getting maybe 1/10 of it, you may want to reach out to your internet service provider to find out if all of the settings are correct. Some of us who use this may be on a very old router that's due for an upgrade. And just remember, I'm sorry if there are internet service providers on the call, but they're not going to call you necessarily to tell you need to upgrade your router. Some do, some don't, but you may want to look at that. If you have really good bandwidth, then with the VPN, there are some settings in Norton, because I've used that as well. There are some settings that you can go in and adjust to make sure. Webinars, same thing with Zoom. You've got to go and look at the features that you need. So prior to this, a lot of people use the HD video, but that takes up more bandwidth. So if you drop that off, your band, and I'm not using it right now, so the video is still quality video, but it reduces the overhead. So really what you're trying to do is reduce as much overhead. And lastly, if you have 7 people on your internet, when you're trying to do a webinar, you're going to have a problem. So there's almost like a protocol that you may want to share with your family about when you need to do a webinar. You got to get people, go read a book. All right, that's really what I would tell them to do. But you got to turn it off. Like I did that here. I turned off my phone, my iPad, my other computer. I did everything that I could to make sure that I did not spread out my overhead so that I would have challenge presenting today.
And the last question is, what is your website so that they want to be able to find the notes on this?
Sure. So it's pretty easy. It's www, and then it's TNG LLC. So for my military people, that would be Tango November Golf Lima Lima Charlie.com. And the site's there. We will have the offer is up. There's a tab for the COVID-19. You can go, and then you can just send us an email if you're interested. And then a little bit later on this afternoon, we will have this presentation up with the links, and as well as a supplementary document that has all of the terms that I used with the definitions.
Great. Again, Tom, thank you very much for joining us today. You gave businesses a lot of really good, easy to understand information that with takeaways that they can do enact today. Thank you everyone for participating, and we hope to see you tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody.